So, hello and welcome to this edition of the Express Pharma-NutrifyToday Boardroom series. Today, we are joined by Heather Granato, who's founded Women in Nutraceuticals in late 2022 to advocate for gender and research parity in the industry. Hello, Heather, and welcome to the show.
Hello, Viveka. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Heather, let's dive right into it. As founder president of Women in Nutraceuticals, what exactly is the agenda and goals of WIN? I know that's a very nice, acronym for the name, but over to you.
I can give you the story behind it. So it's intriguing for me, having been in the nutraceutical industry for so long. You go to events, you talk with people in the industry and say, oh gosh, it just seems like we don't have a lot of gender parity within leadership, within science. And the conversation was ongoing. At the end of 2021, connected in with a few of my friends after a couple of panel discussions at events and said, what if we got together and actually did something about this? So we were incorporated in early 2022 and made our launch at the end of that year. And we've grown from that point to about 500 individual members, 30 plus sponsors, and 20 association and media partners. And for us, that really speaks to a right time, right place, I think. The industry is really leaning into this idea of what are all the ways that we can accelerate innovation in the nutraceutical industry. And one of those key things is having more diversity, more voices around every table, whether that's the boardroom table or in the lab. So Women in Nutraceuticals is looking to achieve economic and societal equity that will change the industry. And we do that by empowering women to achieve their personal and professional potential. So for us, we're bringing together the full nutraceutical community, men and women, together to look at how do we have more women in senior leadership, more funding for women-led business, and more women in science and research in female populations. Those are the pillars that we're addressing.
Right. So as you said, women have had very low to poor representation in the so-called STEM sectors. So any particular initiatives that, WIN has already been part of to bring back in the gender diversity in senior leadership roles in the nutraceutical sector? Any one or two that we'd really like to go into detail?
Of course, we did an initial baseline survey that really found what are our current numbers, and we are looking at only about a third of women in senior leadership. One area that we're addressing then is how do we help women in, middle management make that next leap. And we're doing that through our pilot mentorship program, which launched at the beginning of the year. We're delighted to see those results come out this summer. And then how do we help fill the pipeline, that broken rung that we have when we don't see women at the first phase of their career promoted? That opens up that gap. So how are we connecting women in small groups and having more of that shared mentorship? That's one aspect. Our Science and Research Committee has been focusing on how do we help address the gap between academia and industry. Our Young Scientists Committee is very interested in understanding how can we have outreach into academia and show the possibilities for getting included in companies, at contract research organizations. There are so many opportunities, and I think they just haven't had the exposure. So when we talk about we just can't find enough women to do these things, we want to help fill that gap.
So you all are actually in the phase of discovering, talent and looking in places where people generally wouldn't look and really expanding the net. One region really where this really can be seen is clinical research on female populations as really not featured in the early drug trials and until it became mandatory and a regulatory requirement. So what are the adverse implications of this imbalance?
I think we've seen a lot of challenges in this area. Certainly, there are different ways that health issues are expressed, and women and men have different issues. And, there was new research that just came out in The Lancet that talked about how women have a higher burden of morbidity-driven conditions related to depressive disorders, headaches, and back pain. These are areas where we have an opportunity to really provide solutions to a population, but we need to actually have research that dives into their needs and what works in a female population. We can't have the right intervention or methodology if we don't understand what's happening with these formulas. Women have different metabolism, body structure, and hormones. So everything really comes down to how can we do this? And I think it will depend on having more women who are developing study protocols. They're bringing a different perspective on what we're studying. How do we look at subgroup analyses and identify and tease out new paths for research, as well as the study protocols themselves? Are there ways that this COVID acceleration of decentralization of clinical research could benefit having a broader population and more diversity in the studies that we do?
Right. So this is one very clear learning from a deficiency which was seen in the pharma sector, and now we're hoping that we can leapfrog those learnings for the nutra sector. Any more learnings that we can take from the pharma sector which you feel can apply to the nutra sector?
I think the nutra sector is very driven by innovation. There's a little bit more flexibility. There's a little bit more leaning into these natural solutions. You also, in many cases, don't have the regulatory constraints that you would have in some of those trials. So what could we take that actually accelerates the research pipeline on these different types of ingredients, that's bringing them to market, and learning from the pharma sector in terms of the safety responsibilities and even patient recruitment and some of the steps that have been taken. Let's take where pharma is around issues like decentralization of clinical trials and apply it now rather than waiting to see how that plays out.
Great. So what does WIN offer women entrepreneurs in the nutra sector? Any specific examples? I know you mentioned a leadership program and a mentorship program, but down the line too, any specific initiatives that WIN has already started?
So on the funding for women-led business, there's certainly an issue there. And our newest committee, which is chaired by Jan Mills, one of our board members, is focusing on entrepreneurs, access to capital, and training for their own presentations. It's certainly something that we found in our conversations, including a panel discussion that I chaired at VitaFoods, that you have different needs. A lot of women are coming from a different perspective. They maybe haven't had exposure to doing the ask. So how can we actually help train for the ask, as well as to think differently about the types of funding that's available. It's not just a single, okay, I need funding, I've got to go ask this. There's family methods, there's banks, there's all kinds of crowdsourcing, different ways of thinking. And I think we've got a lot of passionate women with a lot of great ideas. If we can offer ways to connect those women with the folks who have the funding, we'll be able to accelerate their innovation and go-to-market strategy.
Great. A lot of investors look for a good team, look for women who are, part of a good team before they look at funding it. Now, as you said, a lot of women don't have the exposure probably to a traditional business kind of ecosystem behind them, backing them. What can WIN do for these kind of women entrepreneurs?
I do think it's important to have this base of experience and support from experienced individuals. Now, a lot of these founders and folks that you see on boards are men. Fortunately, we're also seeing a lot of men who are stepping up and they want to be allies. They want to be support. They want to offer their insights on how do we actually move this forward. And I think if we can, build those connections, and certainly our mentorship program has both female and male mentors, because we did have a lot of response from men in the industry who are, there are more men in the C-suite than there are women. So it's important to us to make sure that we're building bridges and bringing allies to the table to support these women as they build out their team and as they develop their path forward.
What do you think about the initiatives of Nutrify Today when it comes to the democratization of nutraceutical supply chain issues? Has this kind of built the bridges, as you so nicely put it, built the bridges between the C-suite as well as the women entrepreneurs out there who are aspiring to be part of the C-suite?
Well, when I look at the Nutrify Today platform, I think there are a lot of opportunities for women in nutraceuticals to be able to build their own networks. I would certainly say getting involved in those networks, reaching out to folks who can benefit you, and embracing the opportunities that technology like Nutrify Today offers that could streamline product development, innovation, and connection. Technology has a great opportunity for this democratization of connections and go-to-market. I also really like the Nutrify Today Academy. I think there's a gap in capacity and understanding. If we can get more education easily with flexibility to women in the space, those types of courses are going to add to the skill sets that will ultimately build the pipeline that we need. So that's an area where I do think you've got a democratization happening.
So what would be your message to women in the Nutrify Today system and on the platform?
My message is always, don't be afraid to reach out and ask. Don't be afraid to reach out and make connections. I believe that the nutraceutical industry is, very interested in innovation, in new thinking, in learning. And I have always found that when I've reached out with a question, and I'm never afraid to ask a question that I just don't know the answer, so someone can help me. There are so many people who are so very interested. So that would be my message is take advantage of the resources that are available.
Lovely to have you with us, Heather, and all the best to you as you build more bridges within the nutraceutical ecosystem, and especially for women entrepreneurs and women in the ecosystem of the nutraceutical system. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. And certainly I wish everyone a very successful upcoming C Suite Sumflex. We're delighted to showcase what WIN is doing and hopefully extending our own reach to serve the Indian market, as well as the acceleration of India as a cornerstone for innovation and development of the supply chain.
Thank you. Good to hear. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.